National Police, or PNP, has recorded 26 stray bullet incidents during the 2013 holiday season. 25 persons have been injured, while one individual, a baby, has died. If not during elections, awareness and calls for a stricter gun policy in the Philippines were renewed during New Year celebrations. The New Year call of the National Capital Region Police Office includes a tall order from their chief.
Commitment natin yung reduction ng street crimes by 50% in 2015.
Congress, on the other hand, has recently passed Republic Act 10591, or the Comprehensive Firearms and Ammunition Regulation Act. Salient features of the law include allowing qualified individuals and juridical entities to own small arms only, but with the maximum number of 15. Beyond this, a person has to prove that he or she is a gun collector. While RA 10591 is welcomed by enthusiasts and the government as a solution to put an end in gun violence in the country, this brings fear to many citizens and gun control advocates that it will all the more worsen the status quo.
Welcome to Opposing Views, a hard, straightforward discussion of today's most pressing issues. 8 million guns are manufactured globally every year. In the Philippines alone, the annual value of small arms and ammunition being exported and imported amounts to more than $40 million. But beyond the big numbers of this multi-billion industry, what's in it for the everyday Filipino who constantly lives in fear of being the next victim of a stray bullet or in the hopes of being saved by either his or her kept gun or by the military and police? We'll find the answers tonight. Our question is there a need for a stricter gun policy in order to curb the rising gun-related violence in the country? Good evening, I'm Rod Nepomuceno, and this is Opposing Views. Joining us tonight in our discussion is Mr. Francisco Pancho Lara, Country Manager of International Alert UK in the Philippines and co-editor of the book entitled Out of the Shadows, Violent Conflict and the Real Economy of Mindanao. Good evening, Pancho.
Good evening.
Can you give us your quick summary of your position here? Do you think we need stricter laws to regulate gun ownership and also to curb gun violence?
Yes, I think we do need stricter laws. I don't think the current Republic Act 10591 actually addresses the problem of gun violence. It has to be amended. It has to be changed radically.
All right. Okay, with us also is Attorney Ernesto Tabuhara, Acting Secretary General of Pro-Gun Philippines. Attorney Tiki, good evening.
Good evening, Rod. Good evening.
Yes, can you give us your maybe a quick summary of your position regarding the current laws regulating gun ownership?
Yes, pro-gun is Peace for Responsible Owners of Guns. We are pro-civilian gun ownership. We are in favor of the law which states that the civilians have the need and the right to possess and own firearms, and we are against further restrictions on the rights of qualified civilians to own firearms.
All right, okay, let's start off the fireworks, so to speak. Oops. First of all, did you leave your firearms at the entrance?
I don't carry one.
I just want to make sure.
I don't carry one.
You don't carry any?
I don't carry one.
Right. Okay, now RA 10591 addresses loose firearms and criminality, right? And so, does this target registered owners or those who are willing to be registered?
In a way, yes, because although the law deals with loose firearms and increases the penalty for loose and unregistered firearms and illegal possession and importation of loose firearms, it also targets greater restrictions on civilian gun owners who have licenses for their firearms, in that it gives more requirements, more scrutiny for civilians who want to apply for firearms licenses, and it also makes it more difficult and more scrutinous for a civilian or a sport shooter to bring his firearm outside of his
Outside,
residence.
okay, just whatever. No, just for the information of the public, when you register a firearm, is it a one-time thing or is it annual?
The registration under the current law is separated from the license. So for the
Okay.
license, I believe it's every 2 years you have
Alright.
to renew it, and for the registration, I believe it's every 4 years.
Yes, that's
Okay, now, Pancho, do you think that this is just addressing the licensed ones, or do you think that it doesn't address the illicit ones or
That's
the illicit
right.
firearms?
I think that is precisely the weakness behind this law. When you're talking about 2 in 3 weapons in the Philippines being illicit in nature, in Manila you're talking about 3 in 4 of guns here in Manila
Right.
are illegal in nature. In Mindanao,
2 out of 3.
2 out of 3 in Mindanao, 3 out of 4 in Manila.
All right.
Then there's a big number of weapons that are outside in the shadows, so to speak. And this law should have addressed that it addresses only those who follow the law. Those with registered weapons means that it won't solve the problem of crime in the streets, gun-related crime, which mainly comes from illicit weapons.
Tony, speaking, your thoughts on
As
that?
per the statistics of
Yeah,
the
the
PNP, 99.9% of guns crimes committed in the Philippines are committed with unlicensed firearms. So
Right.
less than 1% of crimes using firearms in the Philippines are committed using licensed firearms. So we agree on the point that the problem are loose firearms or smuggled firearms in the hands of criminals. But what we do not agree on is the further restrictions of the rights of honest and law-abiding citizens or licensed gun owners who would want to possess, own, and carry a firearm for self-defense or security purposes, because precisely they should be allowed their human right and their divine right to defend themselves and preserve their life and their family.
No, you're part of the committee that helped draft the law, or were you involved in the?
No, actually, I was not part of the drafting of that law, RA 10591, but we were regularly informed of its
okay.
progress.
Now, do you
And,
think, though, that currently the way it's worded, do you think this will protect, directly protect the civilians, or it's sufficient enough to protect the civilians?
Yes,
or at
and-
least better than the past laws
yes
we
and
had?
no. Yes, in the sense that the penalties for illegal possession of firearms and arms smuggling have been increased, but no in the sense that it will disarm or have the effect of disarming law-abiding citizens through excessive overregulation of the right to possess and carry firearms for
So you
self-defense.
feel there's overregulation of
There's overregulation, and on that point, I believe it should be liberalized in favor of the law-abiding gun owners, but stricter on the part of criminals.
Pacho, your thoughts on that?
Disagree with that entirely. How can this be restrictive? It isn't restrictive enough. It permits people to carry weapons now legally outside their homes.
You're saying it's loose. It's
That's
loose.
right.
It's
It,
easy to loose.
it actually does. And, you actually lengthen the list of people who can carry weapons outside their homes. In a regime when we very well know that a lot of guns are actually turned to legal through amnesty programs. You came up with what is called, again, a final amnesty. How would that address the issue of illicit firearms?
The problem with what you said about carrying of firearms outside the residence, there's no list of people in the law which can carry firearms. What is the list there is those who are exempt from the threat assessment requirement.
That's right, but
So we have lawyers, judges, and engineers, and 8 other people.
But only the threat assessment requirement.
But if you qualify and you submit the necessary requirements and you pass all the tests, then it becomes a right of the civilian
That's right.
to own and possess the firearm to
But
carry
can
it.
you explain to me,
Under
Attorney
Section 2,
Tabuhara, why you can carry 15 firearms out of
Okay,
your
you
home?
cannot. Actually, that is a misconception. You can own 15 firearms, but you cannot carry all at the same
That's
time
right.
because
Why?
you only have 2 arms.
Why? You can get a duty detail order. You can set up a juridical entity. You can use your firearms and pass them on to your family members. The case of that fellow in Cavite who killed a lot of people is a story of someone who had illicit firearms in the first place, was able to register them, turn them into legal weapons, and killed a lot of people in Cavite.
Okay, but
The incidents that happened again over the New Year is a repeat of last year's incidents about illicit weapons.
But remember that out of the 1.5 million gun owners who are licensed in the Philippines, again, less than 1% are crimes committed by these people. So we are not the problem. The problem are those who are holding loose firearms. Now, regarding what you said regarding the incidents in the New Year's Eve, there were 12 injuries, no deaths in Metro Manila, which is the largest concentration of licensed firearms in the Philippines. We have around 600,000 licensed firearms in Metro Manila. That's a very low number compared to 1.5 million gun owners. And remember, the total tally nationwide for deaths and injuries during the New Year was only 28. Now, previously, if you recall, during 2012, it was something like 40. and then it was 100 before, and before that it was around 400 during the 80s and 90s. And we credit this to the fact that gun owners are becoming more and more responsible and aware of their rights and obligations and responsibilities under the law.
But do you think
that they will not misuse their firearms or abuse them in any way.
But do you think, Attorney Tiki, that when it comes to the illicit owners, do you think that the law sufficiently addresses the issue of illicit owners, as mentioned by Pancho?
Yes, how do they capture that?
You have amnesty. You're basically legalizing an illegal matter,
Okay,
right?
on that point we agree. Okay, that's the only point we agree on. Everything else we disagree.
Yeah.
Okay, no pun intended.
Yes.
But I'm a straight shooter.
Yeah.
What we are against are those people who abuse their firearms and who have licenses, which happens very rarely. Now, in regard to the criminals, which you mentioned, that's a law enforcement problem ready to solve. Okay, you cannot pass that problem on to the civilians to address that problem because we just comply with the law. Now, if I am a gun owner and I have a license to carry a firearm or possess a firearm, then if I comply with the law, why should I be held liable for what somebody in Maguindanao does?
Illegally.
It has nothing to do with me. So that's my point.
All right, Pancho.
Let me just clarify the facts. No? We did a study of the gun industry, the trading and manufacture of weapons in the Philippines, and we published that report early 2013. First of all, you're not talking about the other side of the picture. Metro Manila has the most number of guns, both legal and illegal. Mindanao has very few weapons. Actually, Mindanao has less than a fourth of the total weapons. Secondly, if you look at the data on threat groups, crime groups, and rebel groups, their weapons are very few in comparison to the number of weapons in civilian hands. The problem with illicit weapons is not that they are in the hands of criminals or threat groups like the MILF or the NPA. Most of the illicit weapons are in the hands of individual and private citizens.
But who commits the crimes? These terrorists and rebels in Mindanao are the ones who are committing all these kidnappings, these robberies, these rapes. And who commits the crimes in the National Capital Region? Very few.
That is
so
neither
that's my
true.
point.
That is neither true, Attorney Tabuhara. While we're doing this study, we are also doing a conflict incidents monitoring of the entire country. We're doing that with the PNP. We're using PNP data. Most of the incidents of gun-related crime are not connected with threat groups or criminal groups. They're connected with civilians who shoot their neighbors, who shoot their fellow citizens on the street.
License?
Illicit.
Illicit.
Okay,
Illicit
that's where we
firearms.
diverge because if
That's one point.
somebody...
It's not the criminals, right? It's the private citizen.
Okay, but I would disagree because if you look at the Zamboanga siege, the Abu Sayyaf kidnappings, the NPA, all these election-related violence, these are not licensed gun owners. They do not buy their guns from licensed gun stores. The Maguindanao massacre in 2010 used army-type weapons, machine guns, bazookas, and these were not guns which are purchased from licensed gun stores. So why would you blame legitimate sellers of licensed guns for the acts of criminals and terrorists in Mindanao, for which they had nothing to do with?
I'm not blaming legitimate gun owners for the acts in Mindanao, but to correct your data, 25% of the weapons used in the Maguindanao massacre had government serial numbers. So therefore, they were registered and they were passed on by the government.
We'll pause right there with that point. We need to take a short break. Meanwhile, please join the discussions online. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/SolarOpposingViews. Follow us also on Twitter at opposing_views. Use the hashtag OVGunlaw. We'll be right back. Please don't go away. Welcome back. You're still watching Opposing Views. We're talking about the gun control policy in order to minimize crimes. And we have with us Mr. Francisco Pancho Lara, Country Manager of the International Alert UK in the Philippines, and Attorney Ernesto Tabuhara, Attorney Tiki, Acting Secretary General of Pro-Gun Philippines. Our debate question for tonight: is there a need for a stricter gun policy in order to curb the rising gun-related violence in the country? If you missed the first part, these two gentlemen went guns a-blazing, so to speak. And before we pause for a break, Pancho, you were making a point that in the Apatuan massacre, 25% of the guns seized
that were used
were government licensed guns.
That's right.
I want to throw that question again now to Tiki. there's a difference, and just for our televiewers' knowledge and information, there's a difference between government licensed guns and those guns that are being purchased by responsible gun
Yes,
owners, right?
government guns are not licensed. Only
Okay.
civilian guns are licensed. For
All
the
right.
government guns, they're issued the memorandum receipt.
All right.
And that is a receipt indicating that the property, the gun is government property, but
Belongs to
there's no license. Now, going back to what Pancho said earlier, the 25% of the guns committed or used in the Maguindanao massacre were allegedly military weapons, so registered with the DND. Even their ammunition that they used in that massacre were DND registered ammunition.
right.
Now, my reply to that is that this is not a licit transaction. It was an illegal transaction. They were holding those weapons illegally.
Illegally, yeah.
Now, Pancho may argue that, well, those weapons were registered. They were registered with the army, but they were obviously not authorized to transfer those weapons to the Ampatuans.
Now, my question is, does the law address those kind of situations? Does the current law address those kind of situations where, illicitly procured
Yes,
guns?
in fact, the law is so strict right now under RA 10591 that if you have a licensed firearm and you sell it to somebody else or transfer it, you cannot give possession of that firearm to the buyer until the licensing and paperwork has already been completed in the name of the new buyer. So that is a criminal offense. If I sell to you a firearm which is licensed and I give it to you before the paperwork is done, I can go to jail for that. So that's how strict the law is.
Pancho, do you agree that the fact that the law provides strict rules with regard
I
to
don't
illicit
think
firearms?
so. And the number one rule that should have been followed is, first of all, if government were cognizant of the fact that there were illegal weapons in the market, they should seize those weapons. They give an amnesty now so that those weapons can be registered. Okay? Why? What's the reason behind registering weapons that are de facto illicit in the first
Okay,
place?
may I answer that?
Like the case of the Cavite guy, right? If I were, for example, a criminal and I went, better yet, if I were the MILF and I were a combatant and I registered my weapon, would you register my weapon?
Okay, may I answer that? Okay, in an amnesty program, such as what has been called by the PNP for several years already, the last one I think was 2010, you can register a loose firearm or unregistered firearm, provided that it has not had a record or has been used in a crime, or it is not government property, or it is not licensed to any other person, ever. So if those three circumstances are not met, the gun cannot be registered. Now, going back to the Ampatuan and these weapons of war that you were mentioning earlier, can they be registered on an amnesty program? Obviously, no. Because the markings on the gun and the serial number would indicate that this is government property. There's a memorandum receipt for the guns. Now, once that appears, you can no longer register the gun. You will have to stencil the serial number and the frame before you are able to register the gun. And that will be checked, background checked by the PNP. So, given that scrutiny, it is impossible to bring an M203 grenade launcher and have it registered because precisely it is an unregisterable firearm.
That's right.
Right,
Well,
Pancho?
let's not talk about M203s. Let's just talk about ordinary handguns, shotguns, and
Small guns.
automatic rifles, right? A lot of those rifles, those handguns are actually illicit at the moment. If you agree with the data I just gave you, most of them are there in the shadows. This amnesty provides people with the ability to register them and turn them legal. My question is this: what is the logic behind registering all of those weapons when they should be decommissioned in the first place?
Okay,
This government has not had a weapons decommissioning project for the longest period of time. That's why you still have World War II weapons in the market. Why just destroy them?
Okay, the logic behind the amnesty program is that they want to bring in more loose or unregistered firearms off the street. Now, the moment you register the firearm, it brings
part
the
of the
firearm
system.
back into the fold of the law.
Yeah.
So that makes it traceable. So chances are, if the firearm is registered or licensed, it will not be used in a crime because usually they use only loose firearms so that they cannot be traced. So that's the logic behind it. And in an amnesty program, we're not just talking about loose firearms. We're talking about expired licenses. Those are also considered loose firearms.
That's right.
So they
They're
can
considered
update
lapsed.
the firearms license and bring them back into the fold of the law, update their address, update the name, and that will already bring some percentage of the loose firearms off the streets where they can be used in crime.
What is your point of the decommissioning part, Pancho?
Well,
I mean, what is your point?
The government should time and again decommission weapons, old weapons in their inventory. The biggest problem with the leakage into the gray market is that the Philippine government hangs on to old weapons. It never decommissions them.
it just goes on and on and on.
That's right. Weapons captured in the battlefield, weapons captured from smugglers. They all stay there in the FEO warehouse. Then you find, you saw this case that they were angry about, this criminal group in Quezon. What did they see? They changed the bores, the firing pins of the weapon. How was that possible? These were police officers who did it in the first place. They're able to do that because of that. Government should destroy all these weapons that are out there in the market instead of giving them a chance to legalize these weapons.
There are actually provisions in the new law which provide for captured weapons, no, from the enemies of the state. No, they are supposed to be surrendered from the army back to the PNP Firearms and Explosives Office, which is the sole repository of all firearms in the Philippines.
That's right.
So that is the new rule. Whereas before, the army unit, which would capture the weapon from the insurgent, would keep the weapon and for the longest time and just have it in their
But now
possession.
they're supposed to
Or if it's a
surrender.
court case where illegal possession of firearms, sometimes those firearms get lost also. So now there are penalties for that. If you sell those weapons which are supposed to be in government custody, there is now a new penalty for that.
I'll give you another point that is worrisome, right? So the government says it's going to replace all the handguns of policemen with Glock 9 guns, right? You're talking about initially 35,000 guns. Then you're talking about moving up to 65,000 guns. What riles us, what worries us, is not that you're changing their weapons. The question on our minds is, what do you do with the old weapons? Because those are the weapons that will again leak into the gray
Those will
market.
in the gray market.
That's right, because there is no rule. Look at this law. This law does not have anything in relation to how to deal with those weapons.
Is there anything in the law that addresses this?
Actually, there are problems even with the current Glock 17s that are issued to the policemen because some of them have found their way into pawn shops. You know, and
The
current ones. So what
the
more
police
the
just
old
sell
ones? But in answer to Mancho's query earlier, yes and no. Yes, the government should address these problems, but no in a sense that I do not believe in decommissioning these weapons. Instead, they should be given to the police officers who do not themselves have their own weapons.
Then that's it. That's your formula for the spread of illicit weapons. Remember, our import figures on weapons already do not match. Customs records in terms of imported weapons are way below what the United Nations Commission on Comtrade reports as the number of weapons that enter the country. Over a 10-year period, we registered 65,000 weapons that were not the gap between the data of customs and those weapons leak into the gray market.
But that is already a law enforcement and regulatory problem, which is what we are also fighting for. We are against illicit firearms. We are against illegal firearms. But what we are advocating is that although we don't go after enough the criminals who wield these loose firearms or the terrorists, they are gradually restricting or constricting the rights of the licit or legal firearms owners to own and possess firearms legally through license.
If we implemented the law as it is, there shouldn't be any illicit firearm entering the gray market or being imported here.
Well, it has been the rule ever since. Yes. But let me just let me just clarify.
Is there something wrong with the law or just the enforcement?
Our stand in pro-gun is that more laws will not solve that problem. In fact, more restrictions will not solve that problem. What will solve the problem are the people who have to be revamped, who are enforcing the law.
Do you agree?
I agree with that.
All right,
100%.
All right, so no more restrictions for you.
That's right. My thinking is this. There is a lot of need to improve the capacities of the FEO, the Firearms and Explosives Office. In fact, one of the things we're thinking about is this time to be able to set up something like the ATF in the US, where you combine different functions and they're under the Department of Justice rather than the police force. Now, those are the things that are...
Actually, we were fighting, since you mentioned the Firearms and Explosive Office, we were fighting for the longest time to have that civilianized, to make it a civilian agency.
Right now, it's not.
It's still a PNP-run organization. So what we were pushing for was civilian individuals who would sit on the firearms board, composed of the DOJ, the DILG, PNP, and also some NGOs, who would be the ones to initiate firearms policies in the Philippines, because we know we are knowledgeable about what needs to be done.
Let me shift gears a bit. There is a provision, and we touched on this earlier, about the owning of 15 guns. Tiki, your thoughts on that? I know that you were saying that a guy can't be carrying 15 guns at the same time. You only have two hands. But where did that number come from? And is it a logical number, or is it kind of a random number?
Obviously, this is the point where we won't agree.
Okay.
We are in favor of the law which says that you can own more than 15 guns. Okay. Actually, it's not 15, but 15 is just the benchmark. It can actually be infinity. So you can own as many as you want, provided you pay for the number of licenses that you must have to maintain these firearms.
So why the 15 though?
What is the logic behind that? First of all, there are 2 points. Number one, under the previous law, under the 1990s and 80s, there was an executive order by President Erap allowing you unlimited number of firearms that you can license. So those licenses under the current law are now respected and grandfathered. So if you have licensed more than 15 guns under the old law, then the current law says that it will respect those licenses and bring you into the fold as a collector.
Yeah.
Okay, now, if you want to buy more than 15 firearms now under the current law, you will have to apply for a special firearms license, which is Class 5, which will entitle you to buy more than 15 firearms, provided you pay the fees. Now, on the morality, and I know Pancho is looking at me in a very strange way, of this ownership of more than 15 firearms, there's nothing moral about it.
No, I'm not raising that at all.
Because I know that you will be questioning me on that, because even the president himself, Pinoy Aquino, has 17 firearms licensed in his name. He is the highest elected official in this land. He's not a homicidal maniac. He's not unstable. Manny Pacquiao owns 20 firearms. Now, again, it goes back to the issue of morality.
You're talking about weapons 15 and above, right? For collectors who have amassed weapons over time and want to maintain them, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but you're also providing now Filipinos the right to buy as many. I'm talking about 15 and below. You haven't answered the question. What's behind the magic 15?
Yeah.
So you're telling me that if I start buying weapons tomorrow, I can buy as many as 15 weapons. What's the logic behind that? Secondly, what's the logic between permitting priests, imams, to own weapons and to carry them outside your residence, right?
And you don't allow architects and
That's right.
and makeup artists and direct movie producers. Right?
That's right. Why bank tellers? I mean, do bank tellers shoot you in the bank?
Okay, I'm not defending that law. Okay,
Yeah.
in fact, we're even questioning that list, no?
Yeah.
Because it seems to be class legislation, no? You seem to have made a distinction between those who can who have a threat and those who do not, and it seems to be arbitrary.
Yeah.
Now, going to your question of the logic, actually there is no logic other than property rights. Okay, just the same way as somebody can collect 10 cars, some people can collect 10 cell phones, some people can collect 10 houses. It's a property right and a civil right just like anything else.
You consider it as any other right?
Correct.
Any
Now,
property.
an inanimate object like a gun is just an inanimate object without a human intervention.
All right.
Now, if you license that gun and you have more than 15 of those weapons or those guns in your possession, there's no moral issue.
Okay, Attorney Tiki, we need to take a short break. More on the issue of gun control when we come back. You are watching Opposing Views. Please stay with us.
For me, no. Kasi may mga taong mainitin ang ulo eh.
May baril ako eh. Kumbaga, hindi naman masama yon pag ginamit mo sa tama kasi pang-depensa naman yun sa sarili.
Hindi ko masakap yan eh. Gumagamit ng baril eh. Hindi naman natin kailangan ng baril eh.
Alam mo naman, pag may baril yung isang tao, lumalakas yung loob, nagiging mayabang sila. So, mas proud sila na makagawa ng krimen.
Sa init sa ulo, baka makamatay.
Welcome back. You're still watching Opposing Views on the Solar News Channel. Our guest for tonight, Mr. Francisco Pancholara, Country Manager of International Alert UK in the Philippines, and Attorney Ernesto Tiki Tabuhara, Acting Secretary General of Pro-Gun Philippines. Our question, is there a need for a stricter gun policy in order to curb the rising gun-related violence in the country? Now, with this law, this 101597, right? Would it be more difficult for gun enthusiasts, just the hobbyists, to license and to process their papers?
Yes, in fact, everybody is complaining. The requirements have been lengthened or increased. The fees have been increased substantially. Now we see license fees worth 10,000, 12,000 pesos, whereas it only cost 1,500 before. And clearances, a lot of clearances. You have to go through a lot of intelligence clearances, court clearances, and this adds cost and burden on the licensed gun owners to be able to comply with the requirements. And if you make it so strict, that you can no longer comply with the requirements. It's just like there's a gun ban. It's saying you cannot own a gun at all.
Now, do you think, Pancho, this amount of strictness that we have in the registration, do you think it helps at all?
Yeah,
in
I actually take a different tack on this. The more difficult it is for people to own guns, that's what I would like, because then it creates additional burdens on people to be able to amass weapons. No?
So
remember, at the end of the day, it is the responsibility of law enforcers to provide us protection outside our domicile, outside our house. This law privatizes the means of protection. Actually, that's what we're worried about. People now can justify owning guns because, it's so insecure. I can go to the mall, I can get killed, I can be shot at, no? And you're actually trying to say that, yes, that's right. You go defend yourself. Citizen, protect thyself. When it should be the law enforcers doing that. So let's put more money into law enforcement rather than permit people to own more guns.
The ideal ratio of police to civilians in an ideal society would be 1:500. In the Philippines, we have only 1:1,000. Coupled with the fact that we live in an archipelagic country and we lack equipment, we lack the budget, we lack the communications, you can imagine what the problem is. All these crimes that are being committed that you read in the papers and the news every day, you will see one common denominator. There's no police around to prevent or protect the civilian from being killed, the victim. And they only arrive after the crime is committed to take pictures of the dead body or take the interview of the victim. Now, my point is, if you want only law enforcement or PNP policemen to have firearms to defend the population, it won't happen because it won't be an effective deterrent because precisely there are not enough of them, and secondly, they lack the budget and the equipment to protect all of us, and thirdly, it is not within their mandate to protect every single citizen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Their mandate of the police is just general peace and order, but they were not slated to be bodyguards or individual bodyguards of individual citizens.
I think this is a policy question at the end of the day. The president and the political leadership can make decisions. They have a choice. Would they rather commit more money into the PNP and strengthen their law enforcement functions and the provision of protection that each one is guaranteed under the Constitution? Or would they privatize the means of protection? Would they permit more and more citizens? The only argument I see behind that is if Noy Noy is preparing for an invasion from China, and everyone is armed, But other than that, it is the responsibility of government to protect us, of law enforcers. I would be more worried if you were out there and I would call on you to protect me under those conditions.
Well, I would, if that would happen, I wouldn't respond in the first place because if you carry a firearm as a civilian, your primary responsibility is just to protect yourself. You are not there to play cop. But going back to what you just said regarding the policy issue, what is cheaper? Is it cheaper to hire more police officers and buy more equipment and have a bigger budget for the PNP, or just to simply allow the civilians to say, okay, you have a gun in the house, you protect your own home, and then we leave it at that, and we will just augment, what your security problem is.
I think
that is the cheaper option. Now, the problem is if the civilian has proper training. Okay, that's the problem, and that is why we go to the core of the problem, which you are complaining about is: does this civilian component of firearms owners have the proper training or proper disposition to responsibly own a firearm? I think that's the meat of the argument.
You have to get a better perspective on the issue of costs. When you're talking costs, we're not talking about public investments here or the budget that needs to be spent. You're talking about human lives. People who lose their lives because of the gun culture, because of the issue of proliferation of firearms and gun-related crimes in the Philippines. So when you talk about cost, let's figure that into the discussion.
Now I know, Pancho, let me insert myself here.
Yeah.
I know that you're not for the total gun ban. Right?
Yes.
But obviously you're more for the
Stronger
restrictions and everything. But I studied and I was going through some research, and I learned that in cities where there's total gun ban, like Detroit, Washington D.C. and all that, there's more crime. So it seems to me, just playing devil's advocate here, not necessarily taking any particular sides, just throwing the question and then ask Tiki's thoughts on it. It seems like if there's more restriction and there's more stricter ban on ownership of guns, there seems to be more crime. Your thoughts on that?
Let me respond to that. the evidence is really mixed. I'll give you a better example, Switzerland. Switzerland is a country where almost everyone has to own a firearm. It's under the law. You have to own, from childhood, they're taught how to use weapons, etc. They check on you daily, and if they see that you're not taking care of your weapons, you either get fined or even arrested. Because it's the situation, the sort of institutions that exist in Switzerland, that despite the presence of weapons, there is very low gun crime. But in Switzerland, the ability also to carry weapons outside homes is proscribed. That's the point. In the Philippines, this gun law almost permits everyone to carry their
let's
weapons
go to that.
outside.
Let's go to
Okay,
that point,
talking
Tiki.
about gun bans, okay, we had a unique year last year. No? We had 2 gun bans, Comelec gun bans for January to June, and then one in October. Okay, we actually did a study of that. I did a study. And we tallied all the crimes committed, violent crimes committed during those periods. And what did we find? Even in spite of the Comelec gun ban, where nobody was supposed to carry his firearm outside of residence, there were still shootings and killings and assassinations, and common crimes went on. So as a result, because of the regular commission of common crimes plus the election-related violence, which coupled those crimes, there was a spike in the crimes, no, for that period, and then it went down after the gun ban because there was no more election-related violence. Now, bringing that to your point that you said, that if you restrict civilians from carrying firearms outside of residence totally, then it would solve the gun problem. That proves, precisely that study that we made proves, that 3,500 violent incidents resulting in 3,300 deaths committed during the gun ban period plus 2,700 injuries, that a gun ban does not work. That the criminals will not respect the gun ban, they will still continue committing common crimes, they will still commit election-related violence, and the only people who comply with the gun ban are the licensed gun owners, who are not really the problem.
Precisely that happens because it is not embedded in the law. You're talking about a gun ban that lasts for several days. Okay? What you need is a law that actually says people cannot carry weapons outside their homes except for these people. Okay? Then you can mention them. Judges, okay, that are under threat. Some say journalists who are under threat. This law enables everyone to carry their guns outside.
Anywhere.
Yes. The proviso there, that's catch-all, is the chief PNP can decide if you are under threat.
Okay, in response to that, we also did further studies in countries, no, which had gun bans. No? We did 4 studies, one in Jamaica, one in the UK, one in Australia, and the current one we're doing now is the one in Venezuela. Okay, in Jamaica, their experience was that in 1975, they had a crime problem. And then they imposed a law which had a total gun ban, What happened to them? In the years since 1975, Jamaica is now number 1 in terms of homicides in the world. They are the murder capital of the world. What happened to the UK after the Dunblane shooting? Their gun ban was declared in 1997 or 1996, and then there was a drop in the shootings, but the crime rate went up. Because why? Because the criminals never really preferred the gun in the UK traditionally. They have used other weapons such as blunt instruments, knives, and robberies, homicides, and rapes and sexual assaults have gone up in the UK since then. And we have the same problem in Venezuela. I think Hugo Chavez, the president of Venezuela, declared a gun ban 2 years ago, total gun ban. And what happened? They have 28,000 deaths in 1 year in a population of 30 million people. That's a lot. That's a lot. And the recent killing was the one of Monica Spears, which is very widely reported in the media. So that goes back to your premise that we've been there, we've done that. And we know that the gun ban does not work. It will never work because criminals, by nature, do not follow the law.
Let's talk about juridical entities. Now, before, in the previous law, as I understand it, juridical entities before, they had to prove that they were under threat. But now, juridical entities just have to go through a certain process.
I think traditionally, juridical entities like security companies, mining companies, and similar companies have been allowed to possess and license firearms, provided it's within the realm of their business. So, for example, mining companies who are in far-flung territories can have their own security force.
Is the rule different now for juridical entities? Is there any changes in the law now with regard to processing and licensing for juridical entities?
I think only insofar as the requirements are concerned.
Is it looser now? Is it looser?
Yes, it is.
It is looser?
I think insofar as the requirements are concerned, but I don't know the list because I'm an individual.
Now, do you think that this is a problem, that it would lead to more... yes, Pacho.
Can I give an example? The government is negotiating a normalization deal now with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, okay? And part of that is disarming. Part of that point is about decommissioning weapons, right? What's the bargaining position of government when it actually wants the MILF to decommission its weapons? Well, at the same time, they come out with a law that makes it very easy for their neighbors to buy weapons anyway. Second, if I were a commander and I were to mobilize 20 of my combatants and say I'd like to form a Blue Guard company, can't I actually do that as a juridical entity?
I don't think the Moro Islamic Liberation Front is recognized as a juridical entity in the first
No,
place. They're
no,
not-
no,
I'm
You're not gonna
saying,
put up-
I'm
put
saying
up
here
a-
I am. Let's say I'm commander so-and-so.
Yes,
And I have 20 followers.
in your
You're
example,
going to
yes.
put up a fake
uh,
agency.
Well, not
Yeah.
fake, but it is possible to set up a security agency and have firearms registered to that agency. In fact, I understand that some candidates during elections do that. They set up a security agency and they have the firearms license to the agency. Now, that is a problem, and we agree that that's wrong. But in the case of the MILF, let me just mention that the decommissioning or the demobilizing of the MILF, I believe, contains a provision that they will be reintegrated, I think, within the armed forces of the Philippines.
don't
If I'm
think
not
so.
mistaken.
All right,
I
I need to, gentlemen,
Okay.
I need to cut you off. Sorry about that, but we need to take a short break. Don't go away. We'll come back, and of course, we'll entertain your Twitter questions, and we'll find out the results for our online poll on the issue and the final words of our guests. Stay tuned. You're watching Opposing Views. Welcome back. This is Opposing Views. I'm Rod Nepomuceno, and we have with us Mr. Francisco Pancho Lara, Country Manager of International Alert UK in the Philippines, and Attorney Ernesto Tiki Tabuhara, Acting Secretary General of Pro-Gun Philippines. And our question for this evening, is there a need for a stricter gun policy in order to curb the rising gun-related violence in the country? So we're at the tail end of our show. Tiki, let me just ask you about the penalties in this new law. Are there stricter penalties, and you think that these penalties are, should I say, scary enough for anyone who wants to violate this law?
Under the new law, the penalties went midway. No? Previously, under the other previous law, the Robin Padilla law of 1994, the penalties were reduced, no, to I believe 2 years imprisonment or 4 years. Now they increased it to one degree upwards, which provides for 6 to 12 years.
This is for illegal
possession, which is still a bailable offense. But of course, you cannot go back to the martial law years where it was 20 years. So that is politically incorrect. Now,
Do you agree in the increase of the penalty, making it stiffer?
I agree and disagree in the sense that I agree that it should remain bailable, an available offense, but I disagree in the sense that it should not go so high so as to make it it will be too restrictive for the gun owners. Yes.
All right, Pancho, your thoughts on the penalties?
I agree that the penalties have been increased, that they actually would help in terms of striking some fear into people in terms of how they manage their weapons. But again, I go back to the same question. It does not address those who are outside in the shadows.
Now, okay, obviously, both of you, gentlemen, are not really for the complete, total gun ban, but there are parties that those who are members of the Gunless Society and those who are espousing the total complete banning of guns believe that just by making it illegal will certainly help.
Yes.
Because the moment it's completely illegal, it's just like any contraband, right? So do you think, though, just we'll touch on this a little bit. What are your thoughts, Pancho, on a complete, total gun ban?
Well, the reason we are not taking that line is because in the Philippines, as in most developing countries, the state has not been able to extend its administrative, political, and military reach to all corners of the country. And so in those areas, you expect people to have weapons to defend themselves, their properties, their families. But look at what's happening in the Philippines. Most of those weapons, illicit, are in Metro Manila. They're not there in the hinterland. That's why one myth that should be destroyed is the thinking that most of the illicit weapons come from the provinces.
But
They
who,
actually come
who are
from
the
here,
people who are
okay?
committing the
Right.
crimes? You know, we have illicit weapons. Okay, we have the greatest concentration of firearms licensed in the Philippines, in
violating?
NCR. But who are violating the law? You know, we have to go back to that issue. Who commits the Zamboanga
It's
siege?
the human person pa rin
Who
behind
commits
the gun.
all these kidnappings in Mindanao? We know who these people are,
Yeah,
the
all right.
terrorists.
Attorney Tuki, there is a question. Actually, it's addressed to a Twitter question at Carpio Don to address to Mr. Lara. If the government can't protect the people, is it right to carry the gun to protect ourselves and our family?
I think that this law actually liberalizes the ability to carry weapons. That's what we're afraid of. I'm not against people being able to carry weapons outside their homes. The point is this law actually extends the list of so that everyone can actually carry weapons.
And that's where you
outside.
have a problem.
That's right. That's where we have, because it actually liberalizes the ability to carry weapons. And that's what most police officers actually and military personnel are also afraid of.
Attorney Tuki, do you think the law the law should have even expanded the list? Do you think the list is probably, it lacks maybe certain...
Well, in our
Professions.
opinion, there shouldn't be a list at all.
There shouldn't be a list at all,
Because
yeah.
the list provides
Everyone should be given.
a false list of who is entitled to carry a firearm, which is false. Because what the list just provides in RA 10591 is who is exempt from the threat assessment requirement. And this is not even comprehensive. There are other people who are subject to threats who should be in that list, who are not in the list. So I would say that we should not liberalize the law, but maybe make it reasonable for those who require the
So the
need
evaluation,
to protect themselves, to be given the opportunity or the option to carry a firearm.
But I know it's a right under the Constitution to defend yourself, but you think that owning a gun is just a privilege?
Now it is a right. Under
now it's a
Section
right.
2 of
It is a right.
RA 10591, it states that the law now recognizes the right of legitimate owners of firearms to defend themselves and qualified individuals to use a firearm in self-defense. So
Okay,
it's a
gentlemen,
right.
I'm sorry. I know I can talk another hour regarding
Yes, that's
regarding
right,
this
yes.
issue. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of our show. Pancho, your final words on this, just to sum up your position on
Yes.
this issue.
We do not like the current law that's come out. We think it is weak. We think it will not provide protection to people who need it. We think it hardly addresses the problem of the shadow economy in weapons, and because of that, we'll go all out to try and amend this law, to change it so that it will actually address the issue of gun-related crime in the Philippines.
All right, Attorney Tiki, Tamara?
We feel in pro-gun that the law is unduly restrictive and it prevents the right of legitimate or licensed gun owners to possess and carry a firearm because it makes it so restrictive that it makes it very difficult for them to comply with the law. So self-defense and the right to life are human rights.
Right.
And we believe that this right to protect oneself and one's family may involve the use of a firearm for security, and we support that right.
All right. All right. Thank you very much, Attorney Tiki Tabuhara.
Thank you.
And of course, Dr. Pancho, Pancho Lara. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Now let's see the results of our online poll. Tiki, I think you have an idea of what the result is. You're telling me. The question is there a need for a stricter gun policy in order to curb the rising gun-related violence in the country? The answer is yes, 65%, and no, 35%, meaning yes, we require stricter laws. All right, so you were correct.
I guessed correctly.
All right, and that's our opposing views for tonight. Tune in again next week for another bold and engaging discussion on today's most relevant issues. I'm Rod Nepomuceno. Good night and God bless.